Hi everyone, I am Michelle Edling. I am excited to start this new class and meet all of you. So let's get into it. So a little bit about me. I live here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I live with my husband Bob and our Border Collie Maverick, and we are very excited because we are expecting our first baby in May, a baby girl. So we are very, very excited, and we've been anxiously awaiting her arrival and getting ready for her. Before moving here to Philadelphia, I grew up in the suburbs, about a half hour away from where we live now. And a few years ago, we moved a little bit closer to the city for my husband's job. And we really, really enjoy where we live. We're close to the city, but also close to the suburbs and our family. So it's been really, really nice. So a little bit about my work experience. I work in a suburban school district about 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia. It's pretty close. It's the school district that I grew up in, so I'm very familiar with it. I currently teach sixth grade math, and I've been in that current role for 5 years now. When I first got hired, I taught math and language arts. And for the past few years, I've been lucky enough to only teach math and really focus on that. So I've really, really enjoyed kind of getting to be an expert in that field. And prior to this role, I did sub for 4 years in my current district. And I subbed K through 12, all different subject areas. So I got a lot of good experience before landing my current position. So, a little bit about my educational background. I went to Penn State University for undergrad and I received my bachelor's degree in elementary education from there in 2011. Had to think about that one for a second. And then a few years after graduating, I went back to school to pursue my master's degree in special education from Arcadia University, which is another university not too far away from where we live now. And right now, as all of you can probably guess, I am currently pursuing my second master's in instructional technology at Fort Hays. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I'm going to talk about some of the topics that we are going to be discussing in Module 1. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the support at the local, state, and federal levels. So at the local level, school boards are primarily responsible for establishing curriculum and hiring personnel and making the overall decisions for the school district. A lot of the local funding comes from property taxes that are collected from homes and local businesses. And typically, the state governments delegate a lot of the responsibility to the local bodies, and then those local bodies, like I said, will decide how to operate their school districts. So typically, federal and state governments provide more than half of the government school funding, and then the school boards are responsible for finding and funding the rest of their budget. At the state level, the state governments exercise primary responsibility for government-run schools, and the states provide most of the funding. And this funding usually comes from income and sales taxes. And in some states, a lot of them here in the US, a lot also use state lotteries. So, as I was conducting my research, I came to realize that federal contribution is relatively low. And in my research, I found a couple different things. Federal contribution was between like 8 and 10%, depending on the source that I was looking at. But typically, these funds come from the Department of Education and other federal agencies. And in order for schools to receive this funding, schools must comply with the rules and the regulations presented. So now I'm going to switch a little bit and talk about who has the power. So in the US, like I said, the federal role in education is somewhat limited. Education is primarily a state and local responsibility. And as I was looking and reading through all the research, it's really important to understand the limits of the federal role in education, so we can acknowledge the benefits that it, does play in our lives in our everyday schools. So at the local level, typically, districts are run by school boards, and school boards are either elected or appointed to run the school district. And usually, for the school district, there is a superintendent that will oversee all of the schools in the district. And ultimately, the superintendent and the local school boards are the people who are responsible for establishing the curriculum, hiring the personnel, and deciding when schools should be closed, they should be constructed, consolidated, all the major day-to-day decisions. At the state level, state governments exercise the primary accountability and oversight for the government-run schools. And at the federal level, the U.S. Department of Education will collect data on the government-run schools and evaluate the performance and then make suggestions for how improvements can be made. So I thought it was important to include the different principles for the federal role in education. And I thought it was important because these popped up a couple different times in the research that I was doing for Module 1. And these 4 principles are believed to define the appropriate role of the federal government in K-12 education. So I'll just quickly read over these. The federal government should ensure that no student is denied the right to equal educational opportunity based solely on race, ethnicity, gender, disability, or other protected status. The federal government should provide compensatory funding to facilitate access to educational opportunity for high-need students, including but not limited to students living in poverty and students with disabilities. The federal government should support educational research and development, and it should also act in a manner consistent with both its unique advantages and limited capacity. So when thinking about the 3 different levels of government, local, state, and federal, I really took these into consideration when I was thinking about the standard for this module and the different components. So for component 6.1, at the local level, it is the responsibility of the school district and school boards to create and promote a mission to support each student's learning needs. For component 6.2, this component is governed by local and state. At the local level, it is the school's responsibility to make data-driven decisions to enhance student learning. And if schools fail to meet these requirements, then the state state may need to support these efforts. And the last component, 6.3, at the federal level, the EEOC enforces laws passed by Congress. So this module really taught me that the 3 levels of government all play a very important role in the educational success of each student. And even though the Department of Education does not directly oversee the public schools, they most certainly have an effect. And states usually have the most oversight, but it's really in most cases that the local school districts provide a lot of the funding through the local tax dollars and make a lot of the decisions. And the decisions made at each of these levels of government have an effect on what happens every day in our schools. And ultimately, the goal is to evaluate, develop, and reform systems to promote student success. So that is it for my presentation. I am looking forward to meeting all of you and working with you through this class. See you later.